Hi. Happy New Year, everyone. Whoa. There we go. Look at look at that. What's this? He knows I was just slicing up carrots. Hey, puppy. Here you go. The year was 2023. And Sleet didn't really see anybody in the chat right now. Which meant he was essentially talking to himself, doing a funny voice. Where are you hiding? What are you doing back there? Waiting for more carrots? Because I've got a big old stack of toilet paper there. Why don't I just move that somewhere else, huh? Do. Don't mind me. Okay, you can mind me again. The year was 2023, and Binabik was patiently waiting for a tasty carrot. He doesn't. I was in the way of that, but if I toss him a bit of food, he kind of flinches until it lands, and then he eats it. He doesn't even consider trying to catch it. Isn't that right? You don't know how to catch. We've tried to teach him. We tried with popcorn, just giving it to him, and then small tosses. He never picked up on it. He's willing to wait for it to hit the ground and then eat it. Crooked. There we go. So, new year. New year, new me. No. New year, same me. I'm not changing. Why would I want to do that? Changing's for chumps. Or for people who have things they'd like to be slightly different. Or significantly different. Hi! Sharkies. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. We're all the way to the 4th of January already. So far. How's the new year treating you? How do you like 2023 so far? Is it good? Farmos is going to be probably another 10 minutes late or so because she had classes. So we may need to figure out how that's going to affect the schedule going forward, because those classes run right until, I think on a normal day, today is a shorter day. I think on a normal day, because today's the first day of them, I think normally they're supposed to go till 8 o'clock, which would mean, she would be missing every Wednesday entirely. I'm not sure if she's supposed to have classes on Fridays. It's mostly okay. You're all nearly over your holiday colds. Oh boy. Look what I have. You know what that is? That's a piece of a carrot. It's a piece of a carrot, puppy. You put it right there. Ah, you missed it. Where'd it go? Where is it? Where's the carrot? He looks so confused. It's right in front of him on the ground here. And he, Oh, has he found it? Where has it been? Where's the carrot? Where's the carrot? Where is it? Hey, that took you way too long. Why did it take you so long to find the carrot that you knocked onto the floor? What a silly Billy. So, I just received, like a month late. Whoa! Wow! Look at that cover. Look at that. It's so shiny. It is slightly. It arrived with a couple of. You can't really see them on camera, I suppose. Maybe you can. Yeah, you sort of can. Right here, there's a couple of lines running this way. Let's see if I can get the light. Too much light there. You can kind of see them there. And there's one, like, diagonal line. So that's a little bit of a bummer, you know. Not that it's like. It's more visible in person. Like, I can see them pretty clearly, you know, even from this distance. Um, but it is quite nice looking. Um, I don't know. This I'm mostly excited for because nostalgia for me. Like, I read Dragonlance books when I was in elementary school. I was definitely reading them in like grade 4 and 5 because there was one. I remember in elementary school when I went to Cultus Lake Elementary. There was a bit where we had to act out a scene from a book we'd read, and I had been reading a Dragonlance book called The Gully Dwarves, which is where there's these little sort of gnomish dwarves in because there's regular dwarfs, right? There's hill and mountain dwarves and Dragonlance, but there's these gully dwarfs, which are sort of like a cross between I don't know, like a gnome and a goblin. Like they're like they're almost like gnomes with what you would expect of the intelligence of goblins. And in this book, they find this horn that grants wishes, um, and all sorts of hijinks ensue. And I performed a scene from that book in grade 4 or 5, which involved me walking around on my knees while wearing a house coat and carrying a big stick. Which, in retrospect, I had this stick. Maybe it wasn't a horn that granted wishes. Maybe it was a big stick or something, or a staff or something that granted wishes. Or maybe I interpreted it wrong at the time. Because I had this big stick that I think used a Sharpie or something to put all these runes all over. Um, and I remember, because there's a scene where one of them wishes for a rat. Or something like that. And I had this little plushy rat that my friend was supposed to tug on a string so that I could smack it with the stick. And he decided to, even though this was a school project for me, he yanked it so it went flying across, and we were both laughing. I wasn't really upset at the time. I thought it was just funny, even if it didn't go to plan. So, as a result, I've been looking forward to this. You got some Dragonlance books, right, Sharkies? Little. I'm not actually entirely certain. Maybe that's supposed to be like placed on because there's a lot of armies and things in like there's the armies of the Dragon Queen that are invading the world of Kryn, the continent of Ansalon, I think. Big old map back here, yeah, the continent of Ansalon. There's a full page map here of it, which is pretty cool. And then there's like a map that I think is like 8 times this size that you can tear out. There's I suppose probably the Dragon Queen there. So we're probably going to frame that and put it on the wall with the rest of our maps. Oh, you don't have? Like a player's handbook or anything? Sorry, did I say Dragonlance books? I meant Dungeons and Dragons books, like just like a player's handbook or DM's guide or anything. Now I'm like kind of wondering what I actually said. What I meant to ask was, do you have like any D&D just like guidebooks? Um, I don't know if you've noticed, but inside, as far as I'm aware, every single 5th edition book, just on this page here where the credits are, you go down here in almost every single D&D book, if not every single 5th edition book, there's a little disclaimer regarding the contents of said book. In this one, it says, disclaimer. The dragon armies cannot ensure that owners of this book will not have their lives repurposed in the service of the Dragon Queen's glorious will. Promises to the contrary should be considered best-case scenarios, not statements of certainty. Thank you for supporting the dragon armies and a cataclysmically bright future for all of Kryn. I think I've got another book sitting here. What's this one? Oh yeah, I got this for Christmas from Farmouse's sister, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which has a lot of supplementary rules for 5th edition, a lot of updates and things. They changed this book, like, it's all optional rules, but it presents options for, like, being a little bit more all-inclusive in terms of what race you choose for, like, elf or dwarf or whatever, in that you can just pick any race and then custom pick what stat bonuses you get, so that it's not all dwarfs have high constitution. You could pick an elf and give it a constitution bonus instead, and it makes which race you're playing as a little bit more cosmetic, I suppose. I mean, you'd still get your racial bonuses in terms of, like, if you get spells or something from being, a drow or whatever, but it means that the stat bonuses you get, it means that you don't have to play an elf if you want to be a wizard or whatever, right? Or you don't have to play a human if you want to just pick where your stats go. But yeah, this one's disclaimer says, contained herein are the observations of the Archmage Tasha, later known as the Witch Queen, and then Igwilv. She is one of the greatest wizards in the history of the multiverse. We fear there is an incantation hidden within these notes, and have therefore bound this tome with powerful wards. If you are reading this, the first ward has already been broken. If you dare read any further, we cannot guarantee the safety of your soul, or that you won't open a portal to another plane of existence. If a portal does appear, pray that nothing worse than Tasha's mother, Baba Yaga, appears. Nothing worse than Baba Yaga. And if the mother of hags arrives, be sure to offer only praises of her daughter. Or offer muffins. She loves muffins. So, all the way back to, like, just even the player's handbook and the DMG and things like that for 5th edition, there's all these little disclaimers in them, which I've always enjoyed. I think those are all pretty clever. Yeah, they're all fun. Most of them are pretty tongue-in-cheek. So Dragonlance is an interesting setting. It's not... My instinct is to say it's not really very high magic by default. But that might be sort of my preconception of it. And as a D&D setting, it's probably more high magic than I kind of think of it as being, because in the books, there's very few wizards, and they're all sort of, those that do exist aren't very popular with the general population. They're all kind of feared and mistrusted. And at the beginning of the Dragonlance trilogy, there's all of, like, one cleric in the entire world, basically. At least one good cleric. Even then, actually, at the beginning of the original trilogy of books, there might have been, I guess, technically 0 clerics. At least for the good gods. that sort of thing, maybe changes throughout the books. Um, but there's some interesting other races. There's Kender, which are sort of like fearless kleptomaniac gnomes or halflings. Um, Here's one right here. And that Kender is holding what is called, if it will focus, a hupak staff, which is sort of like a staff with a steel tip on one end and a sling on the other. And when they twirl them around, they make sort of a scary whistling sound. Um, and there's on the evil side of things, there's these creatures called Draconians. Now these were around before Dragonborn were a thing in D&D. Because Dragonborn are a little bit more recent. And Draconians are a little scary because there's lots of them, and there's different types of them, and depending on what type they are, even when they die, they can still, like, on death of Draconians, bad things happen. Like, they might turn into a pool of acid that can hurt you, or they might turn into stone to trap your weapon, or the corpse might explode depending on what type of Draconian it is. So it's an interesting, there are some interesting creatures that are a little more common in Dragonlance. I wonder how death throws. When the Draconian is reduced to 0 hit points, its magical essence lashes out as a ball of lightning at the closest creature within 30 feet of it, before arcing out to up to 2 other creatures within 15 feet of the first. Each creature must make a DC 14 Dex save. On a failed save, the creature takes 2d8 lightning damage and is stunned until the end of its next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't stunned. So that's nasty, right? Oh, Farmhouse is showing up. Okay. That means Benimic is going to bark. I should probably mute my microphone just for a moment so that you don't have to deal with that. So give me a moment. Muting. Okay, I have unmuted. I think the puppy has finished the barking. Oh, the book is very shiny. I have unmuted. I have adjusted my chair so you can get past safely. So yeah, I am. The weird thing about this book, about getting this Dragonlance book, is I've got a game in progress, right? I've talked about having why am I drawing a blank suddenly on the game that I'm running? Barovia. What's it actually called? What's his name? Strahd, Curse of Strahd, right? I was totally drawing a blank there for a moment. I've got Curse of Strahd going right now, and I'm not really willing to run 2 full campaigns at once. And this isn't a setting book. It's got maybe 15 pages about the setting or something like that, plus whatever details you pick up through the campaign itself. But this is a campaign book. This is you are running this adventure. I think it says it's, level 1 to 11. It's supposed to take characters through to, yes, Curse of Strahd. It's made use of 5 O's. So this is like all the way to level 11. It doesn't take you through the entirety of like the War of the Lance. Oh, yeah. It takes you through an adventure in, I think, the region of Solamnia, which is where there's there's an order of knights. There's several orders of knights there. And it takes you through sort of a portion of the War of the Lance, I believe. But it's a campaign. And I don't know if they're going to release a second part of it or not. I've just noticed it's got this little symbol up in the corner. I didn't notice that before. I wonder if that means something, if they're going to have further books. Maybe that's supposed to be like Dragonlance. And I don't think they've announced whether there's going to be a follow-up campaign to this or anything. Because I've been noticing that 5th edition campaigns, I don't know that many of them go any higher than, like, I don't know what the highest level. I've never seen one that goes higher than, like, level 12 or so. Ook. Because one thing that I would like to do someday is be involved, either running or playing in, a game that actually goes from like level 1 to level 20. But that seems like such a daunting task. Right? Like, I've been in a game that went to level 12, and I've planned games to go to like level 12 or so. But I don't know if I've ever actually played in a game that started at low levels and went any higher than about there. Actually, I've been in like 2 games that went to level, started low and got to like level 12. I know what you meant. Easier with milestone leveling. Well, yes, it's easier with generous leveling, right? Of course, it's going to be, because that would just mean, in general, it's going to take less time. But I still feel like players need to feel like they've earned their levels. If they get a level every session, then whatever. I don't think that's that exciting. I guess if that was the goal from the beginning and everybody knew, but still that's going to be a relatively short game, and I feel like it would be easy to get overwhelmed because every session your character's going to be different. But I'd love to do that someday as like a large scale, get some people that have regular schedules or who don't care too much about missing 1 or 2 sessions here and there, and just go for it, right? But I don't know if it's a realistic goal or not. I don't know if I'll ever actually be able to do it, because it just seems so I don't know. So I actually ordered the deluxe edition of this, which came with all 3 things: the book, the GM screen, which I don't actually need because I've got an amazing wooden screen, but it does have a lot of useful information on the back. Honestly, I've seen some GM screens that just have completely useless information on the back. And there's not everything on here needs to be on here, but there is actually some good stuff on here. So I appreciate that. So it might actually go, maybe, like if I ever ran this, it might go behind my wooden screen. And then it also came with, which I have not opened up, this, which is pretty interesting. It is a tabletop game, like board game, and it's integrated into the campaign of Shadow of the Dragon Queen to represent like mass combat. So, I'm intrigued. You played one that was from a campaign book. You did 2 to 11 or so, playing mostly every 2 weeks for 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. I've been involved in some games like that. And you did 2 to 9, playing really randomly for 4 years. So you think 2 to 20. Yeah, I think I've seen estimates of about 4 years to get to level 20. But our groups that we play with definitely have troubles with keeping things consistent, which isn't, I think uncommon. It's tough to get people together on a regular basis. Especially, I think, probably more so in BC because everything's so spread out here. We're all scattered. It's not a really dense area. I mean, if everybody lived, within a few blocks of each other, that'd be easier. But like our personal, sort of close group of friends are all scattered from, Richmond through New West to like Chilliwack, which makes getting together regularly. Fabio, hello. We're just talking D&D right now. That's not that far. It's several hours of driving. To get from where I am to Chilliwack can take an hour to an hour and a half. Sometimes more than that. Is Fabio somebody that I know? You've come to the conclusion that historically D&D was misunderstood as a kid's game. I mean, I don't think Gary Gygax and his group were kids, but you're in Langley. Oh, all right. Then if you're someone I know, I could hazard a guess, but I'm not gonna. We were just talking about the Shadow of the Dragon Queen set that I just finally received. Yeah, I hope so, but I don't know when I'm going to get a chance to actually run it. Because I'm currently already running a game for some friends, which is Curse of Strahd. And that's going to take probably a while to get through. I don't really want to run 2 games at once, so I'll either try to convince someone else to run it and then play in it myself, but I don't know whether or not that's going to happen. Or I guess it'll just be a few years before I get a chance to run it. Where's Benedict? Hey, puppy. You want a carrot? Yeah, DMing it's fun, but yeah, it takes a lot of mental energy for me at least. It takes a lot of, I don't know, once I finish a game session, I'm pretty exhausted afterwards. So now that Farmhouse is here, we have just recently finished reading part 1 of Castle of Wizardry. And we had not yet started part 2, Riva. which I've been looking forward to. So in my copy, once again, not really, because I've got this larger paperback edition, doesn't really relate to everybody else's, but we are on, in my copy, pages, what is this, 80 and 81. This map is on page 80, which shows, if I can straighten it out here, the Sea of the Winds, the Isle of the Winds, with Riva, the River of Vales, I believe that says, pasture lands and peat bogs, and way down here is the Hook of Erendia, which I didn't mention last time we looked at this map. I think this is another Shelley Shapiro map, it looks like, down there. Peat bogs, right? Yeah. This map was drawn in 1983. This map is older than I am. Oh, I'm a little warm. So yeah, hi Fabio, I'm Sleet. I read books on stream here. We've been reading The Belgarath by David Eddings. We occasionally have read some of Sir Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels. And we started with The Hobbit over a year ago now. Yeah. So I'm going to get into it. If everybody's ready. Why am I so warm? Which is a contrast to last night. We were out in Chilliwack for a few days, and it was my friend's birthday, and he's been really, his favorite show right now is this show called Taskmaster, which is a British sort of comedy show where each series of Taskmaster is a group of 5 comedians and other entertainment types that individually go and perform a bunch of tasks that can be kind of varying levels of ridiculous. And so secretly, I put together basically an episode of that for my friends to participate in. So they had a bunch of tasks. Like one of the tasks was to blow out a candle from the furthest distance away without knocking over the candle. And they were given a variety of supplies that were all almost equally useless in blowing out a candle from any distance. Or they had to identify the contents of a bunch of jars of white powders without interacting with them very much. Or they had to memorize a list of 20 items, and then after they were done, they were given 5 minutes or something to memorize the list, and then after that they had to gather up all of these various items and put them in a box. So just weird, stupid things like that. They had to get a basketball through a basketball hoop without touching the ball with their hands. So we spent the entire day on the second doing that. So I'm still exhausted from putting that together. I was a little stressed about whether everything was going to go according to plan. Yeah. Anyways, back to the book. I don't know. I got distracted. That's what I was up to this year. This year's been exhausting so far, but it's been a lot of fun. Anyways, Chapter 9, everyone. Chapter 9. Ready? Once more, Relg led them through the dark, silent world of the caves. And once more, Garion hated every moment of it. It seemed an eternity ago that they had left Prolgu, where Sinedra's farewells to the frail old Gorim had been long and tearful. The princess rather baffled Garion, and he gave himself over to some speculation about her as he stumbled along in the musty-smelling darkness. Well, if we didn't have that bingo square already, we would now. quick update on where we're at on bingo. Baffled. Garion is clueless about Sinedra. Garion is baffled about Sinedra. Same thing. The princess rather baffled Garion, and he gave himself over to some speculation about her as he stumbled along in the musty-smelling darkness. Something had happened at Prolgu. In some very subtle ways, Sinedra was different, and the differences made Garion jumpy for some reason. When, at last, after uncountable days in the dark, twisting galleries, they emerged once again into the world of light and air, it was through an irregular, brush-choked opening in the wall of a steep ravine. It was snowing heavily outside, with large flakes settling softly down through the windless air.
"Are you sure this is Sandaria?"
Barak asked Relg as he bulled his way through the obstructing brush at the cave mouth. I don't know, it's snowing, it reminds me of Canada, it's probably Sandaria. Relg shrugged, once more binding a veil across his face to protect his eyes from the light.
"We're no longer in Ulgo." "There are a lot of places that aren't in Ulgo, Relg,"
Barak reminded him sourly. "It sort of looks like Sandaria," King Chohag observed, leaning over in his saddle to stare out of the cave at the softly falling snow. "Can anybody make a guess at the time of day?" "It's really very hard to say when it's snowing this hard, Father," Hetar told him. "The horses think it's about noon, but their idea of time is a bit imprecise." You know, that's what I always say. If you want to know what time it is, ask a horse. "Wonderful," Silk noted sardonically. "We don't know where we are or what time it is. Things are getting off to a splendid start." I don't think that's quite enough to qualify for the bingo square.
"It's not really that important, Silk,"
Belgarath said wearily.
"All we have to do is go north. We're bound to run into the Great North Road eventually."
"Fine," Silk replied. "But which way is north?" Garion looked closely at his grandfather as the old man squeezed out into the snowy ravine. He's just getting started, right? The old man's face was etched with lines of weariness, and the hollows under his eyes were dark again. Despite the 2 weeks or more of convalescence at the stronghold, and Aunt Pole's considered opinion that he was fit to travel, Belgarath had obviously not yet fully recovered from his collapse. Healing takes time. Sometimes a lot of time. As they emerged from the cave, they pulled on their heavy cloaks and tightened the cinches on their saddles in preparation to move out. "Uninviting sort of place, isn't it?" Sinedra observed to Adara, looking around critically. "This is mountain country," Garion told her, quickly coming to the defense of his homeland. "It's no worse than the mountains of eastern Tolnedra." "I didn't say it was, Garion," she replied in an infuriating way. They rode for several hours until they heard the sound of axes somewhere off in the forest. "Woodcutters," Dernick surmised. "I'll go talk with them and get directions." He rode off in the direction of the sound. When he returned, he had a slightly disgusted look on his face. "We've been going south," he told them. "Naturally," Silk said sardonically. Is that 2 sardonicles in this chapter so far? It is. That's the second sardonically from Silk. Did you find out what time it is?
Late afternoon, Dernick told him. The woodcutters say that if we turn west, we'll strike a road that runs northwesterly. It'll bring us to the Great North Road, about 20 leagues on this side of Muros. Let's see if we can find this road before dark, then, Belgarath said.
It took them several days to ride down out of the mountains, and several more before they had passed through the sparsely inhabited stretches of eastern Sandaria to the more thickly populated plains around Lake Sultern. It snowed intermittently the entire time, and the heavily traveled roads of south-central Sandaria were slushy and lay like ugly brown scars across the snowy hills. Their party was large, and they usually had to split up among several inns in the neat, snow-covered villages at which they stopped. Princess Senedra quite frequently used the word quaint to describe both the villages and the accommodations, and Garion found her fondness of the word just a trifle offensive. That reminds me of the Color of Magic, right? That's the one with Two Flower as the tourist. I feel like the word quaint is addressed in that book, if I'm not misremembering. We haven't read that on the channel, but... The kingdom through which they traveled was not the same Sandaria he had left more than a year before. Garion saw quiet evidence of mobilization in almost every village along the way. Groups of country militia drilled in the brown slush in village squares. Old swords and bent pikes, long forgotten in dusty attics or damp cellars, had been located and scraped free of rust in preparation for the war everyone knew was coming. The efforts of these peaceful farmers and villagers to look warlike were often ludicrous. Their homemade uniforms were in every possible shade of red or blue or green, and their bright-colored banners obviously showed that treasured petticoats had been sacrificed to the cause. The faces of these simple folk, however, were serious. Though young men strutted in their uniforms for the benefit of village girls, and older men tried to look like veterans, the atmosphere in each village was grave. Grave, not grim. It's grave. Sandaria stood quietly on the brink of war. At Sultern, Aunt Pole, who had been looking thoughtfully at each village through which they had passed, apparently reached a decision. "Father," she said to Belgarath as they rode into town, "you and Chohag and the rest go straight on to Sendar. Dernick, Garion, and I need to make a little side trip."
"Where are you going?"
"To Faldor's farm." I'm going to hold off on the square for a bit. Since we're going there...
"Faldor's? What for?"
"We all left things behind, Father. You hustled us out of there so fast that we barely had time to pack." Apparently I need to mute my computer. There we go. Her tone and expression were so matter-of-fact that Garion immediately suspected subterfuge. And Belgarath's briefly raised eyebrow indicated that he was also fairly certain that she was not telling him everything.
"We're starting to trim this a bit close, Paul,"
the old man pointed out. There's still plenty of time, Father, she replied. It's not really all that far out of our way. We'll only be a few days behind you.
"Is it really that important, Paul?"
Yes, Father, I think it is. Keep an eye on Errand for me, won't you? I don't think he really needs to go with us.
"All right, Paul."
A silvery peal of laughter burst from the lips of Princess Sinedra, who was watching the stumbling efforts of a group of militiamen to execute a right turn without tripping over their own weapons. Aunt Pole's expression did not change as she turned her gaze on the giggling jewel of the Empire. I think we'll take that one with us, however, she added. Sinedra protested bitterly when she advised that she would not be traveling directly to the comforts of King Fulrak's palace at Sendar, but her objections had no impact on Aunt Pole. Doesn't she ever listen to anybody? The little princess grumbled to Garion as they rode along behind Aunt Pole and Dernick on the road to Medalia. She always listens, Garion replied. But she never changes her mind, does she? Not very often, but she does listen. Aunt Pole glanced over her shoulder at them. Pull up your hood, Sinedra, she instructed. It's starting to snow again, and I don't want you riding with a wet head. The princess drew in a quick breath as if preparing to retort. I wouldn't, Garion advised her softly. But she's not in the mood for discussion just now. Sinedra glared at him, but pulled up her hood in silence. You know what? I would almost qualify that as Garion doing something unexpected. Actually being sensible about somebody arguing with Aunt Pole. Not quite, but almost. It was still snowing lightly when they reached Medalia that evening. Medalia. I don't know if we've actually heard the name Medalia before. Medalia. It's talking about it like that's where Faldor's farm is, but... And I mean, maybe it came up in Pawn of Prophecy, but I don't remember it. Doesn't sound familiar. Sinedra's reaction to the lodgings offered at the inn was predictable. Or maybe it's like the little town nearby. I remember there was Upper Grault. They went to Upper Grault. I don't remember Medalia. Sinedra's reaction to the lodgings offered at the inn was predictable. There was, Garion had noted, a certain natural rhythm to her outbursts. She never began at the top of her voice. I think we're waiting for something to be truly unexpected, to be like if he had unprompted done the thing with the sticks and the twigs that became a flower, but that was asked for so it wasn't really unexpected. You know, he was asked to do something, so he did something. I think we're waiting for something that you're not supposed to see coming. I don't know. I feel like we'll know it when we see it. There was a certain natural rhythm to her outbursts. She never began at the top of her voice, but rather worked her way up to it with an impressively swelling crescendo. She had just reached the point of launching herself into full voice when she was suddenly brought up short. What an absolutely charming display of good breeding, Aunt Pole observed calmly to Dernick. All of Garion's old friends will be terribly impressed by this sort of thing, don't you think? Dernick looked away, hiding a smile.
I'm sure of it, Mistress Pole.
Sinedra's mouth was still open, but her tirade had been cut off instantly. Garion was amazed at her sudden silence. I was being a bit silly, wasn't I? She said after a moment. Her tone was reasonable, almost sweet-natured. Yes, dear, just a bit, Aunt Pole agreed. It was perhaps noon of the following day when they turned off the main road leading to Erat. Erat, I remember. I don't know if you remember Erat. When has Erat been mentioned? Pop quiz. It was perhaps noon of the following day when they turned off the main road leading to Erat into the country lane that led to Faldor's farm. Where I remember it from was not to do with Faldor's farm. Since that morning, Garion's excitement. My copy has less dialogue. What? What? I need a picture. I need a picture of your copy. Of this extra dialogue. I'm so upset I don't have my copy of this book. Ugh. Yes, dear, just a bit. Aunt Pole agreed, yeah. Was there something after that? Hi, puppy. You want a piece of carrot? Please forgive me, all of you. Sinedra's voice dripped honey. Oh, and then does Aunt Pole say something like, don't overdo it? Don't overdo it, Sinedra. Yeah, I remember that. My original copy definitely has that in it. I didn't know this copy was that much worse. Then yours resumes. Ah, that's upsetting. You have to let me know if that comes up more in the future. Dang it. Stupid packed up books. Frassa, rutabaga. Yep, I remember that. Yeah, it's missing entirely from this copy. It's just not there. That's the biggest difference you've noticed so far. Yeah, well, hopefully there's not much more than that. Maybe it's just a small bit of editing for some reason. Excuse me. All right, back to it. Nobody's told me why we should remember Erat yet, though. So, they turned off the main road leading to Erat into the country lane that led to Faldor's farm. Since that morning, Garion's excitement had risen to almost intolerable heights. Every milepost, every bush and tree was familiar to him now. And over there, wasn't that old Kralto riding an unsaddled horse on some errand for Faldor? Finally, at the sight of a tall, familiar figure clearing brush and twigs from a drainage ditch, he was no longer able to restrain himself. He drove his heels into his horse's flanks, smoothly jumped a fence, and galloped across the snowy field toward the solitary worker. "Runderig!" he shouted, hauling his horse to a stop and flinging himself from his saddle. "Your honor?" Runderig replied, blinking with astonishment. "Runderig, it's me, Garion. Don't you recognize me?" "Garion?" Runderig blinked several more times, peering intently into Garion's face. The light dawned slowly in his eyes like a sunrise on a murky day. "Why, I believe you're right,"
he marveled. You are Garion, aren't you?
Of course I am, Runderig, Garion exclaimed, reaching out to take his friend's hand. But Runderig shoved both hands behind him and stepped back.
Your clothing, Garion. Have a care. I'm all over mud.
I don't care about my clothes, Runderig. You're my friend. The tall lad shook his head stubbornly.
You mustn't get mud on them. They're too splendid. Plenty of time to shake hands after I clean up.
He stared curiously at Garion.
Where did you get such fine things? And a sword? You'd better not let Faldor see you wearing a sword. You know he doesn't approve of that sort of thing.
Somehow things were not going the way they were supposed to be going. How's Dorune? Garion asked. And Zubret?
Dorune moved away last summer,
Runderig replied after a moment's struggle to remember.
I think his mother remarried? Anyway, they're on a farm down on the other side of Winold. And Zubret? Well, Zubret and I started walking out together not too long after you left.
The tall young man suddenly blushed and looked down in embarrassed confusion.
There's a sort of understanding between us, Garion, he blurted.
How splendid, Runderig! Garion exclaimed quickly to cover the little dagger cut of disappointment. Runderig, however, had already taken the next step.
I know that you and she were always fond of each other,
he said, his long face miserably unhappy.
I'll have a talk with her.
He looked up, tears standing in his eyes.
It wouldn't have gone so far, Garion, except that none of us thought that you were ever coming back.
I haven't really, Runderig, Garion quickly assured his friend. We only came by to visit and to pack up some things we left behind. Then we'll be off again.
Have you come for Zubret too?
Runderig asked in a numb, stricken sort of voice that tore at Garion's heart. Runderig, he said it very calmly, I don't even have a home anymore. One night I sleep in a palace, the next night in the mud beside the road. Would either of us want that kind of life for Zubret?
I think she'd go with you if you asked her to, though, Runderig said. I think she'd endure anything to be with you.
But we won't let her, will we? So far as we're concerned, the understanding between the two of you is official.
I could never lie to her, Garion,
the tall boy objected. I could, Garion said bluntly, particularly if it'll keep her from living out her life as a homeless vagabond. All you have to do is keep your mouth shut and let me do the talking. He grinned suddenly, just as in the old days. A slow smile crept shyly across Runderig's face. The gate of the farm stood open, and good, honest Faldor, beaming and rubbing his hands with delight, was bustling around Aunt Pole, Dernick, and Sinedra. The tall, thin farmer seemed as lean as always, and his long jaw appeared to have grown even longer in the year and more since they had left. There was a bit more gray at his temples, but his heart had not changed. Princess Sinedra stood demurely to one side of the little group, and Garion carefully scanned her face for danger signs. If anyone could disrupt the plan he had in mind, it would most likely be Sinedra. But, try though he might, he could not read her face. Then Zubret, descended the stairs from the gallery that encircled the interior of the courtyard. Her dress was a country dress, but her hair was still golden, and she was even more beautiful than before. 1,000 memories flooded over Garion all at once, together with an actual pain at what he had to do. They had grown up together, and the ties between them were so deep that no outsider could ever fully understand what passed between them in a single glance. And it was with a glance that Garion lied to her. Zibret's eyes were filled with love, and her soft lips were slightly parted as if almost ready to answer the question she was sure he would ask, even before he gave it voice. Garion's look, however, feigned friendship, affection even, but no love. Incredulity flickered across her face, and then a slow flush. The pain Garion felt as he watched the hope die in her blue eyes was as sharp as a knife. Even worse, he was forced to retain his pose of indifference, while she wistfully absorbed every feature of his face, as if storing up those memories which would have to last her a lifetime. Then she turned and, pleading some errand, she walked away from them. Garion knew that she would avoid him thereafter, and that he had seen her for the last time in his life. It had been the right thing to do, but it had very nearly broken Garion's heart. He exchanged a quick glance with Rundrig that said all that needed saying. Then he sadly watched the departure of the girl he had always thought that one day he might marry. When she turned a corner and disappeared, he sighed, rather bitterly, turned back, and found Sinedra's eyes on him. Her look plainly told him that she understood precisely what he had just done, and how much it had cost him. There was sympathy in that look, and a peculiar questioning. Despite Faldor's urgings, Belgara immediately rejected the role of honored guest. It was as if her fingers itched to touch all the familiar things in the kitchen once more. No sooner had she entered than her cloak went on a peg, an apron went about her waist, and her hands fell to work. Her polite suggestions remained so for almost a full minute and a half, before they became commands. And then everything was back to normal again. Faldor and Dernick, their hands clasped behind their backs, strolled about the courtyard, looking into storage sheds, talking about the weather and other matters, and Garion stood in the kitchen doorway with Princess Sinedra. "Will you show me the farm, Garion?" she asked, very quietly. "If you wish." "Does Lady Belgara really like to cook that much?" She looked across the warm kitchen to where Aunt Pole, humming happily to herself, was rolling out a pie crust. "I think so," Garion answered. "Her kitchen's an orderly kind of place, and she likes order. Food goes in one end, and supper comes out the other." He looked around at the low-beamed roof with all the polished pots and pans hanging on the wall. His life seemed to have come full circle. "I grew up in this room," he said quietly. "There are worse places to grow up, I suppose." Sinedra's tiny hand crept into his. There was a kind of tentativeness in her touch, almost as if she were not entirely certain how the gesture would be received. There was something peculiar and rather comforting about holding her hand. It was a very small hand. Sometimes Garion found himself forgetting just how diminutive Sinedra really was. At the moment, she seemed very tiny and very vulnerable, and Garion felt protective for some reason. He wondered if it would be appropriate to put his arm about her shoulder. Together they wandered about the farmstead, looking into barns and stables and hen roosts. Finally, they reached the hayloft that had always been Garion's favorite hiding place. "I used to come here when I knew that Aunt Pole had work for me to do," he confessed with a rueful little laugh. "Didn't you want to work?" Sinedra asked him. "Everybody here seems to be busy every single moment." "I don't mind working," Garion told her. "It's just that some of the things she wanted me to do were pretty distasteful." "Like scrubbing pots?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "That's not one of my favorites, no." They sat together on the soft, fragrant hay in the loft. Sinedra, her fingers now locked firmly in Garion's, absently traced designs on the back of his hand with her other forefinger. "You were very brave this afternoon, Garion," she told him seriously. "Brave?" "You gave up something that's always been very special and very important to you." "Oh," he said. "You mean Zubret. I think it was for the best, really. Runderig loves her, and he can take care of her in ways that I probably won't be able to." "I'm not sure I understand." "Zubret needs a lot of special attention. She's clever and pretty, but she's not really very brave. She used to run away from trouble a lot. She needs someone to watch over her and keep her warm and safe. Somebody who can devote his entire life to her. I don't think I'll be able to do that." "If you'd stayed here at the farm, though, you'd have married her, wouldn't you?" "Probably," he admitted. "But I didn't stay at the farm." "Didn't it hurt, giving her up like that?" Garion sighed. "Yes," he said. "It did, sort of. But it was best for all of us, I think. I get a feeling that I'm going to spend a lot of my life traveling about, and Zubret's not the sort of person you can ask to sleep on the ground." "You people never hesitated to ask me to sleep on the ground," Sinedra pointed out, a trifle indignantly. Garion looked at her. "We didn't, did we? I guess I never thought about that before. Maybe it's because you're braver." The following morning, after extended farewells and many promises to return, the four of them set out for Sendar. "Well, Garion," Aunt Pole said as they rode across the hill that put Faldor's farm irrevocably behind them. "Well, what?" She gave him a long, silent look. He sighed. There was really not much point in trying to hide things from her. "I won't be able to go back there, will I?" "No, dear. I guess I always thought that when this was all finished, maybe we could go back to the farm. But we won't, will we?" "No, Garion, we won't. You had to see it again to realize it, though. It was the only way to get rid of the little bits and pieces of it you've been trailing behind you all these months. I'm not saying that Faldor's is a bad place. You understand. It's just that it's not right for certain people. We made the trip all the way up there just so I could find that out. It is fairly important, Garion. Of course I enjoyed visiting with Faldor, too, and there were a few special things that I left in the kitchen, things I've had for a very long time, and that I'd rather not lose." A sudden thought had occurred to Garion, however. What about Sinedra? Why did you insist that she come along? Aunt Pole glanced back once at the little princess, who was riding some yards behind them with her eyes lost in thought. It didn't hurt her, and she saw some things there that were important for her to see. I'm fairly sure that I'll never understand that. No, dear, she agreed. Probably not. Well, I think that's where we've got to stamp that. And look what I picked up. Just for fun, I happened to see it while I was picking up some stuff for the game I told you about. Oh, you didn't realize that immediately? That's why I showed it to you. It was for this. So, where is it? Baldor's farm mentioned. Was anybody expecting it to be mentioned to this extent, I wonder? It was a pretty sad scene, wasn't it? Sad nostalgia. Let me see. I need to get something to press it against that isn't going to get damaged if it leaks through over here. Whoop, whoop. Too much. It's very red now. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I kind of went overboard. Sorry. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. That was a very... Yeah, that was a bit of a sad scene, wasn't it? You said your least favorite trope was avoided. What did you think was... How are you worried that might go? Rivalry between Sinedra and Zubret, perhaps? Or was it Faldor's farm on fire? My least favorite trope is, I'll pretend to hate you because I don't care, or because I care. Ah, I see. Yeah. No, this one was, I felt like that was rough, you know, just the benign friendship. I don't know. Oh, yeah. No, she was even lovelier, if anything. Yeah. Well, and the worst thing about those is they always, one person makes the decision and the other gets no say, right? I mean, kind of that's a little bit what happened here. Not exactly the same. I don't know. He just sort of, he knew that it wasn't going to be possible for it to work out, so he just avoided it, basically. Yeah, and it takes the other's agency. Yeah, exactly. This was just him, I don't know, just showing her, you know, I'm sorry, it's not happening, and she acknowledged it and left, even if it hurt both of them. So, it snowed fitfully for the next day and a half as they rode along the road that crossed the white central plain toward the capital at Sundar. Though it was not particularly cold, the sky remained overcast, and periodic flurries swept in on them as they rode west. Near the coastline, the wind picked up noticeably, and the occasional glimpses of the sea were disquieting. Great waves ran before the wind,
their tops ripped to frothy tatters.
I suppose one other thing to kind of mention, like, it was an interesting scene, him going back to the farm. Because that was a very clear, you know, he needs to go and see that that section of his life is behind him now. You know, his childhood is officially left behind. I know I'm kind of going back to it, but just it was an interesting scene that you might not get in, like, if you think of this book, like this series, as one extended book, right? Or, you know, just the fact that this is divided up into 5 books, it's got more time for smaller scenes like that. And you might not get that with a shorter series or a shorter story. That, you know, return home, not at the end. You know, he didn't go back at the end of the series. It didn't end with him returning to Faldor's farm. It's like going back to hometown after being away at college. Yeah, have you ever gone back to your elementary school and just everything feels so small? Like walking through the doors and, I don't know, the hallways, and just everything is not exactly the way you remember it. Mm-hmm. So you could never go home again. This hallway was longer, right? Wasn't it? The gym was bigger, the things on the walls were higher up. Alright. That's what this, yeah, that definitely, this scene is like that. I feel like that scene at Faldor's farm was a little like that. Mm. Seeing a vending machine in an elementary school is weird. Maybe I'm dating myself a little bit with that, but so, at King Fulrak's palace, they found Belgarath in a foul humor. It was little more than a week until Erastide, and the old man stood glaring out a window at the stormy sea as if it were all some kind of vast personal insult.
So nice that you could join us, he said sarcastically to Aunt Pole when she and Garyon entered the room where he brooded. Be civil, father, she replied calmly, removing her blue cloak and laying it across a chair.
Do you see what it's doing out there, Pole?
He jabbed an angry finger toward the window. Yes, father, she said, not even looking. Instead, she peered intently at his face. You aren't getting enough rest, she accused him. Angst.
Mia goes to brownies in the same gym you did. Guides as a kid, and you guarantee that Jim has magically shrunk. I believe you. It definitely has. That must be really strange. Soon we'll get Old Man Yells at Cloud. I feel like that's almost there already.
How can I rest with all that going on?
He waved at the window again. You're just going to agitate yourself, father, and that's bad for you. Try to keep your composure.
We have to be in Riva by Erastide, Pole.
Yes, father, I know. Have you been taking your tonic?
There's just no talking with her.
The old man appealed directly to Garyon.
You can see that, can't you?
You don't really expect me to answer a question like that, do you, grandfather? Not right here in front of her. Belgarath scowled at him.
Turncoat,
he muttered spitefully. That is some sass from Garyon.
The old man's concern, however, was unfounded. 4 days before Aristide, Captain Greldick's familiar ship sailed into the harbor out of a seething sleet storm. I made it into the book. Her masts and bulwarks were coated with ice, and her mainsail was ripped down the center. When the bearded sailor arrived at the palace, he was escorted to the room where Belgarath waited with Captain, now Colonel, Brendig, the sober baronet who had arrested them all in Kamar so many months before. Brendig's rise had been very rapid, and he was now, along with the Earl of Selene, among King Fulrac's most trusted advisors. Seething sleet storm, yeah, that's pretty good. Everybody remember Colonel Brendig? That could be a reminder for you where we've heard about Erat before.
Anheg sent me.
Greldick reported laconically. Is that right? No, he is not the Baron of Erat. E-R-A-T. But you're close. You're on the right track, anyways.
He's waiting at Riva with Rodar and Brand. They were wondering what was keeping you. I can't find any ship captain willing to venture out of the harbor during this storm,
Belgarath replied angrily.
Well, I'm here now,
Greldick told him.
I've got to patch my sail, but that won't take too long. We can leave in the morning. Is there anything to drink around here? How's the weather out there?
Belgarath asked. Is it just me, or does that question seem a little unusual?
A little choppy,
Greldick admitted with an indifferent shrug. He glanced through a window at the 12-foot waves crashing green and foamy against the icy stone wharves in the harbor below.
Once you get out past the breakwater, it isn't too bad. We'll leave in the morning, then,
Belgarath decided.
You'll have 20 or so passengers. Have you got room? We'll make room,
Greldick said.
I hope you're not planning to take horses this time. It took me a week to get my bilges clean after the last trip. Just one, Belgarath replied. A colt that seems to have become attached to Garion. He won't make that much mess. Do you need anything? I could still use that drink,
Greldick replied hopefully. The following morning, the Queen of Sandaria went into hysterics when she learned that she was going to accompany the party to Riva. Queen Layla went all to pieces. King Fulrac's plump little wife had an absolute horror of sea travel. That's come up before. Even in the calmest weather, she could not so much as look at a ship without trembling. When Polgara informed her that she had to go with them to Riva, Queen Layla promptly collapsed. Everything will be all right, Layla, Polgara kept repeating over and over again, trying to calm the agitated little queen. I won't let anything happen to you. We'll all drown like rats, Queen Layla wailed in stark terror. Like rats! Oh, my poor orphaned children! Now stop that at once, Polgara told her. The sea monsters will eat us all up, the queen added morbidly.
crunching all our bones with their horrid teeth. There aren't any monsters in the Sea of the Winds, Layla, Polgara said patiently. We have to go. We must be in Riva on Aristide. Couldn't you tell them that I'm sick, that I'm dying? Queen Layla pleaded. If it would help, I will die. Honestly, Polgara, I'll die right here and now on this very spot. Only, please, don't make me go on that awful ship. Please. You're being silly, Layla. Polgara chided her firmly. You have no choice in the matter. None of us do. You and Fulrak and Celine and Brendig all have to go to Riva with the rest of us. That decision was made long before any of you were born. Now stop all this foolishness and start packing. I can't, the Queen sobbed, flinging herself into a chair. Polgara looked at the panic-stricken Queen with a kind of understanding sympathy. But when she spoke, there was no trace of it in her voice. Get up, Layla, she commanded briskly. Get on your feet and pack your clothes. You are going to Riva. You'll go even if I have to drag you down to the ship and tie you to the mast until we get there. You wouldn't, Queen Layla gasped, shocked out of her hysteria as instantly as if she had just been doused with a pail full of cold water. You wouldn't do that to me, Polgara. Wouldn't I? Polgara replied. I think you'd better start packing, Layla. The Queen weakly struggled to her feet. I'll be seasick every inch of the way, she promised. You can if it makes you happy, dear, Polgara said sweetly, patting the plump little Queen gently on the cheek. We'll never know. I think we can all imagine it was a chaise longue. That's the end of chapter 9. And it's nearly 8:30, so I think we'll probably stop there. Quite a lot going on in that one chapter. He knows. Which hand's it in, Ben? Which hand's it in? Which hand? Which hand? Which hand? Which hand? Which hand? Which hand? That one? Or that one? That one? That one? That, you're holding on to that one. Is it? It is! He got it right. Well, everyone having fun? What a smart pup. We've almost made it to Riva. A bit of a huff there. I'm sure we will reach Riva on Friday, which is the 6th. So as far as I'm aware, there's nothing that should stop me from doing a stream on the 6th. Farm Mouse, do you have any classes on Fridays right now? Because that's something that's going to need sorting, is as things are right now, Wednesdays have become slightly more inconvenient. Our normal Wednesday time doesn't work so well for Farm Mouse. If you get into this class that you went to today,
you're going to be occupied until just half an hour ago every Wednesday. Which is tricky because currently, like, Wednesdays have been working decently for a while for us. So, I don't know. What does everyone think? I mean, I could just keep doing them as normal and Farmhouse will miss out, but that would be kind of a bummer. Reducing our audience by an not insignificant margin. Plus, you know, be sad for Farmhouse to miss out. Or we could look at maybe Mondays. Would Mondays work for people instead? Mondays and Fridays? It'd be a little tricky because it would be, you know, just before and after the weekend. I don't necessarily like caging the weekend like that, but it could work. Or we could just drop the Wednesdays until this class is done. How long would that take? That would be a while. Make it more intermittent. Only when Farmhouse has Mondays off or anything. 12 weeks. 3 months. Mrs. can't make Mondays. Okay, so Mondays are out. What about Tuesdays? I could just, you know, before I'd been trying to keep Tuesdays and Thursdays clear so that I can go to Kung Fu, which has been very intermittent for me lately. I haven't gone for quite a while with, you know, holidays and everything and being sick and etc. etc. But I could try to just go on Thursdays and make that a little more consistent. If Tuesdays work for people, and then we could do Tuesdays and Fridays. Or theoretically Thursdays, but it feels weird to, like, I don't really like the idea, I think, of doing 2 days back to back, Thursdays and Fridays. I like to space it out a little better than that. Or, as mentioned, we could just drop it for almost 3 months. Drop the Wednesdays. And just do, you know, if Farmhouse has any Wednesdays that are free, you know, just try to plan those ahead of time if those come up. I don't know. Mrs. can do some Tuesdays. Well, I mean, it's not exactly a big stream, is it? Frequently, it's just the three of us, with intermittent visits by a variety of others. So realistically, losing anybody kind of is not a small... It's basically like our personal little book club, isn't it? I need to have a shower. Oof. I don't know. Why don't we all think about it? If anybody comes up with a great idea, well, we'll look at that. And if not, we'll figure it out by next Wednesday. But either way, I will be here on Friday. So we'll do that no matter what. All right? So, have a great night. Have a great rest of the week. I hope your Thursday and Friday are very, very nice. And hopefully I'll see you on Friday, okay? Well, I'll think about it between now and then and see if we come up with some miracle answer. How about just... How about... Oh, I see. That's not a typo. How about Thursdays? Let's just add a day to the week. Do you really want more days in a week? Maybe that would be a good thing, as long as it's another, like, maybe it'll be part of the weekend. We'll put it in between Saturday and Sunday. It'll go Saturday, Thursday, Thursday. It doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? We already got a Thursday, so having a Thursday as well. It is a typo. You meant Thursday? Thursday? Oh, I thought you were trying to say hair. Thursday. Thursday at least sounds slightly different from Thursday, Thursday. Okay, I'm gonna go. Have a good night. And I'll see you on Friday, okay? No, shh. No more days. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining me as we ventured back to Faldor's farm. See you on Friday. Bye-bye.